The Gospel according to Matthew, the 21st and 26th chapters. When Jesus and his disciples had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples ahead of them.
Go into the village ahead of you, and you will find a donkey and her colt tied up together. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this: the Lord needs them, and they will send them with you immediately.
This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophets, saying, "Tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey with her colt." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them, brought the donkey and colt, and put their cloaks on the donkey, and he sat on her. The large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed were shouting,
"Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest heaven!"
When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in turmoil, with questions and shouting.
Who is this?
This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee. Immediately after entering Jerusalem, Jesus went to the temple and drove out all those who profited from the prayers and sacrifices made to God. When he spent a couple of days healing the sick, casting out demons, and preaching, many times the Pharisees and priests came to challenge him, but were not able to stop him or arrest him. During those days, one of Jesus' disciples was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests.
"What will you give me if I betray him to you?"
They paid Judas 30 pieces of silver and began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. On the first day of unleavened bread, some of the disciples came to Jesus.
"Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat Passover?"
Go to the house of Matthias and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.
So the disciples did as Jesus directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he spoke to them.
Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me.
And the disciples became upset.
Surely not
It
me,
couldn't be
Lord.
me,
Not me.
Lord.
I tell you, the one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man faces death, as it is written of him. But woe to the one who betrays the Son of Man. That man will wish he had never been born.
Judas spoke up.
"Surely not I, Rabbi."
You have said so.
While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples.
Take and eat this bread. It is my body.
Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them.
Drink from the cup, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink wine until that day when I knew that I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom.
After Jesus and the disciples had sung a hymn together, they all went out to the Mount of Olives, where Jesus spoke to them again.
You will all become deserters because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee.
Though all the rest become deserters, I will never desert you.
Truly I tell you, Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you.
I will not deny you either, Lord.
I will stand by you, Jesus.
Not me. I won't deny you either.
After this, Jesus walked with them to a place called Gethsemane.
My friends, sit here while I go a bit further and pray. Peter, James, and John, please walk with me.
Leaving the rest of the disciples sitting where they were, Jesus walked on with Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. He became sad and agitated.
I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me.
Going a little distance away, Jesus threw himself on the ground and prayed.
My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But I know it is not what I want, and that you are in charge.
Jesus stood up and went back to where he had asked the 3 disciples to wait for him, where he found them sleeping. He woke them up.
Could you not even stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Jesus left the 3 disciples where they were and prayed a second time.
My Father, if this cup of suffering cannot pass unless I drink it, then your will be done.
Jesus came back to where the 3 disciples were. He found them sleeping again, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them where they were sleeping, he went away and prayed for a 3rd time, saying the same words. He came back to the disciples, and he woke them up.
Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand when the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Look, my betrayer is already here.
While Jesus was still speaking, Judas arrived, accompanied with a large crowd of people carrying swords and clubs, the mob set to get Jesus by the religious leaders of Jerusalem. Now Judas had told them ahead of time how he would know, or how they would know which one was Jesus.
The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him.
Judas walked up to Jesus, greeted him, and kissed him.
My friend, do what you are here to do.
The people from the crowd came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those with Jesus drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear.
Stop that. Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that if I asked my Father, he would at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But if that happened, how then will the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?
Turning from his disciples, Jesus spoke to the crowd of people.
Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me.
At that moment, all the disciples deserted him and fled. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas the high priest, in whose house the religious leaders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priests, and going inside, he sat with the guard in order to see how this would end. Now the religious leaders were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But even though many witnesses to what Jesus had said and done came forward, they found none until the last 2 came forward.
This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.
The high priest stood up.
Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?
But Jesus was silent.
I put you under an oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God.
You have said so. But I tell you that from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothes.
He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?
He deserves death.
They spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him.
Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?
Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came up to him. You also are with Jesus the Galilean.
I do not know what you are talking about.
Then he went out to the porch. Another servant girl saw him and started talking about him with some bystanders. This man was with Jesus of Nazareth.
I do not know what you're talking about.
The bystander kept looking at him and whispering among each other. Finally, one of them spoke up. Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you. Peter began to curse, and he swore an oath.
I do not know the man.
Right at that moment, the rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said.
Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
And Peter went out and wept bitterly. When morning came, all the religious leaders conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders.
I have sinned by betraying innocent blood.
What is that to us?
Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, Judas departed and hung himself. The priests picked up the silver, but did not keep them.
It is unlawful to put these coins into the treasury, since they are blood money.
After conferring together, they used the money to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. And they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of one whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. Jesus stood before the governor Pontius Pilate.
Are you the king of the Jews?
You say so.
But when he was accused by the religious leaders, he did not answer.
Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?
But Jesus gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, and Pilate was greatly amazed. Now at the time of the Passover festival, Pilate was accustomed to releasing a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time they had a dangerous prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. After they had gathered, Pilate made them an offer.
Whom do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who is called the Messiah?
Pilate had already realized that it was out of jealousy that Jesus had been handed over to him to be crucified, and he had just received a message from his wife about Jesus. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him. The religious leaders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. Pilate made them the offer a second time.
Which of the two do you want me to release for you?
Barabbas!
Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?
Let him be crucified!
Why? What evil has he done?
Let him be crucified!
So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing and that a riot was beginning, he took some water, washed his hands before the crowd.
I am innocent of this man's blood.
His blood is on us and on our children. So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Soldiers took Jesus to the governor's headquarters, and the whole cohort gathered around him. They stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. Placing a reed in his right hand, they knelt before him.
Hail, the King of the Jews.
Jews!
They spat on him, took the reed and struck him on the head. Stripping him of the robe, they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they compelled this man to carry his cross. When they came to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, the soldiers offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after he tasted it, he would not drink it. After they crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Over his head they put the charge against him and read it out loud.
This is Jesus, the King of the Jews.
2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed on the road derided him, shaking their heads.
You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross.
In the same way, the priests also, along with the scribes and the elders, were mocking him.
He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe him. If he trusts in God, let God deliver him now, if he wants to, for he said, I am God's son.
The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice,
Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani.
In English, this means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders heard him say it and misunderstood what he had called out.
This man is calling for Elijah.
At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a stick. But others tried to stop him.
Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him.
Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks were split. Now the centurion, who was there keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what had taken place. They were terrified.
Truly, this man was God's son.
Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He asked Pilate for the body of Jesus, and Pilate ordered it to be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and laid it in his own new tomb, which had been hewn in the rock. Then he rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate.
Sir, we remember what that impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away, and tell the people he has raised from the dead, and the last deception would be worse than the first. You have your own guards with you, so take them and make it as secure as you can.
So they went with their guards and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone.